Hi, my name is Doug Vogt from the Diehl Foundation, and I'm recording this March 16th, 2023. What I'm going to cover in this video is 5 gifts that DARPA and the FAA gave us. And they basically prove again that they know our sun does nova and what causes the ice age. They have a program you're going to see called ICE, believe it or not, how to modify the environment and people and plants so they'll survive extreme cold weather. Also, they wound up telling us where you should go to survive this thing indirectly. And solar activity of the FAA, you're going to find out why the FAA grounded the nation's planes on January 10th. And it wasn't the story they gave. Anyway, so let's start in. The reason I was able to figure this stuff out, all of it, is because of the philosophy. You have to have an information theory of existence in order to wind up figuring it out. Otherwise, you don't have a chance at all to wind up figuring it out. Anyway, this is the DARPA thing. I'll get to this in a few minutes. This is the second edition. I've added additional stuff in Chapter 1 and Chapter 12, I think it is. And this book in Chapter 8 has all the proofs, including the evidence from the journals, science journals, of what causes the ice age and what happens. This is also when I first figured out the drop dead date of when this thing's going to happen. Timelines. Ben Davidson gave me the idea from Suspicious Observers about doing a timeline. It was a good idea. So you can put it in perspective to know what happened and when it happened and why it happened. So we're going to go here. I'm going to start with my videos on the philosophy in Series 1, how DARPA answered it and what they did. And I'm going to go through the sequence here. The only two I'm going to cover in the next video after this, will be fairly quick after it, will be these two here, where I'm going to go into what's happened with that Senate Bill 4488 and the corresponding House bill, and the amendment that DHS made. And I think it's because of the letter I sent them. Anyway, my letter to the Department of Defense, which was delivered, it was mailed on the 13th, they got it on the 20th. This is back 2020. Give you a little history. And they received it on the 7th. Well, they mailed back to me on the 7th. And this is what he had in that paragraph. I don't think I ever showed this before, but it gives you an idea what they were thinking about how to solve the problem. AI could well progress significantly by 2046. Some models suggest that AI, by that point, will surpass the combined problem-solving capability of all humans on the planet. Such an intelligence would almost certainly be able to solve the problem of imminent human extinction, if desired. Isn't that a desire? I mean, you'd think, you know. Any thoughts on that potential and how it relates to the operating system post-singularity? Now, what was interesting here, he wrote that he started out as a Catholic, then gave that up and basically became an atheist. So he's accepting my concept of God as being an operating system in this die hole we're in. Also, post-singularity. That's the reversal, but you could call it rightfully singularity. This is the information dimension. When it crosses this imaginary x-axis, it creates this spike of energy. On the sun, it's called a nova. And the atom is called, this is Planck's constant. And it's information contained by, or should I say, potential electrons contained by information. Also, notice he's not saying a comet or meteor is the thing that causes the extinctions and the ice ages. They already knew that wasn't true. So, as I said, I started my Series 1 on March 14th, it's Pi Day, 2018. That was the same day, by coincidence, that Stephen Hawking died. The outline of the theory of gravitational reversals, clock cycles, were presented by May 27, 2018. September 7th, 2018, about that 4.5 or 3.5 or so months later, DARPA announced a multi-year investment of $2+ billion in the program IA Next. So they were going to try, remember, all of this about the ice age and polar reversal and what happens was the greatest secret the country had. Now, in the next video, I'm going to go through a timeline, and you're going to see what happened and how this thing developed, even to the presidential executive orders and this bill, 4488. It'll then all make sense to you why this thing is happening. By the way, I should probably add right now, there's one thing when a philosophy is just a theory. It's another when a theory is been acted on by government and large entities like the Defense Department and NASA, that it's no longer a theory, but it's also a high probability it's going to happen. That's when they start spending a lot of money and passing laws and doing things. In other words, you have to look at the actions of government. It's not that they are going to say it, it's what they do. So some of this stuff is going to be scary for you. It's one thing, you had my theory, video series 4 presents what I think, what the model says, what happens during the polar reversal, the ice age, and everything. And you're going to find out they agree with me and how they agreed with me. Anyway, that's a lot of money to spend on a computer program and probably a very, very powerful supercomputer. November 9th, 2018, I started my Series 4. That's the series that explains what happens during the polar reversal and cataclysm. I was done with the nuts and bolts of it by April 10th, 2019. That was the majority. And I did more after that, including this one here, is within Series 4. On August 15th, 2019, was the first DARPA Sub-Canadian Challenge Tunnel Circuit Contest. And this is, if you watch my Series 4, parts 5G and 5H, you'll see all the evidence. You'll see what they were doing. But what it does, what it proved to me, I'll explain here, is that they had spent well over $21 trillion of our taxpayer money on building what they call DUMBs. They're called, I think, the Deep Underground Military Bases Survival Caves or something like that. But we'll just call it DUMBs. And they built them because they didn't know the total events of what happens. They didn't have a good model and philosophy of what really happens during the polar reversal. And that some of the reason is because the CIA was the one running this thing in the beginning to keep it quiet. And Nixon is the one who caused the problem. Instead of giving it to the CIA, he really should have given it to what I've suggested many times, to USGS, the geologists, NASA, and NOAA. And in this latest bill, 4488, they in fact did include all three by name. So they are listening to me. Anyway, what it told us is that, one, they knew that they built them in the wrong place. They did know about the ice age and how much ice and snow was going to be over where their entrances were, which is along the East Coast and out west and Midwest. So That's why they wanted a bunch of computer programmers and companies to come up with fully autonomous robots that could detect people, whether they were dead or alive. They actually had dummies in the caves, which I showed in these two videos. Some were heated and some were not. Ask yourself, why are they heating some and not other? Isn't that just good enough to recognize as a person? No, they wanted to see who's dead or alive inside the cave, which implies they couldn't have a person to go in there because they couldn't get to the front door because it's going to be blocked by thousands of feet of glacial ice and snow. August 13, 2020, I mailed registered letters to Secretary of Defense, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. The registered letters were received on the 20th. I got an answer back September 7th. That's about 12 business days later. I think it was a Monday they sent it back to me. I did not hear back from them for about 2 years until the bill came out. And I cover the bill in Series 4, Part 6E. And the bill is called Global Catastrophic Risk Management Act of 2020. I'm not going to go through the gory details of it, just the highlights so you understand this isn't written for a Carrington event. A Carrington event is when our sun flared up real big time. They think it was an X-45. It happened September 2nd, 1859. September 2nd is my birthday. I don't know why. But it happened September 2nd, 1849. And they estimated it was an X-45 flare. And it fried the telegraph lines, burned. Some of the telegraph offices burned also. And in the next video, I'll go briefly only what I said into the letters that I sent off to DHS and FEMA. But this is the essence of the bill. It gives you an idea what they're really dealing with. Existential risk. The term existential risk means the risk of human extinction. It's not a joke, folks. Global catastrophic risk. The term global catastrophic risk means the risk of events or incidents consequential enough to significantly harm, setback, or destroy human civilization at the global scale. That didn't happen with a Carrington event. Now, the reason I mention it is because the companies that did the building and design work for these cave systems were only told that it was going to be a Carrington event and all hell's going to break loose. Well, it's not true. Nobody died during the Carrington event. Anyway, global catastrophic and existential threats. The term global catastrophic and existential threats means those threats that with very likelihood can produce consequences severe enough to result in significant harm or destruction of human civilization at the global scale or lead to human extinction. The bill has catastrophic listed 36 times, global catastrophic 19 times, existential, remember, it defines it as human extinction, 17 times, existential risk 11, human extinction twice. This bill, like I mentioned in some of the letters, was made for two disasters. One is a good likelihood, I get about a 20% chance we're going to have a Carrington-like event in this solar cycle, number 25. The next one is the solar cycle just before the reversal, 100% chance, and we're going to have multiple Carrington events. I go over that in one of the earlier videos of why, and it basically explains why civilizations around the world started building pyramid mounds and also caves. The bureaucracy does not act or risk making a wrong decision just on one person's writings, works, or conclusions. In other words, they're not taking my word for it. It's the Defense Department. There's a reason why they funded an AI program, as you saw just a few months after I did the basic theory. They already had my Gazier Judgement book. Senate Bill told me that the Defense Intelligence Agency, they're the adults in the room, by the way, had agreed with me as to what happens during the geomagnetic reversal, polar reversal, the nova, the resulting ice age, and the clock cycles that cause it. They would not have agreed with me on my word alone. They used that AI program in a supercomputer. They must have dumped in all the geology books, journals, physics books, geology and physics textbooks, everything. Journal Nature, Science, Geology, Bulletin, everything, including my works and my books, as well as probably my videos. They said they had watched all of them, and they let the AI program and see if it came up with the same answer. Now, it means they probably also programmed this information theory of existence of mine, the theory of multidimensional reality, to see if it can wind up coming with the same conclusion I did. They already knew the matter theory of existence thanks to my video series 12, part 1 and 2. There were, the Aristotelian stuff was created by the Pisos. They already knew that. And evidently, their program came up with the same answer. That's why they could, with certainty, go to DHS and ask them, or be part of this bill, let's fund this bill and get it out. Because I had given them the drop dead date. I gave them first a range between September and December 2046. That's when the next Gleisberg cycle will be. And on top of it, the Torah gives an exact date of October 16, 2046. So they knew about this, and they knew they did not have much time. That's why I'm going to go through this stuff and the next video to show you a timeline that anyone who has any doubts still, once you see the timeline and what they've been doing, then you'll understand they believe me too. Okay, back to sequence. June 23rd, 2022, Senate Bill 4488 was dropped into the Senate bill. It became a Senate bill. There was a corresponding House bill, H.R. 8574, mirrors the Senate bill. It's exactly the same. August 15th, DARPA ice control for cold environments, cold ice. They issued a broad agency announcement. I have that. If you're interested in seeing it, send me an email to info@dieholefoundation.com and I'll mail you a copy. And you can read it and go through it. I'm only going to briefly go through it now and just lightly cover it. But you'll get to the same conclusion I did, that they did too. When you see this stuff, it'll stand out. They're also agreeing they're going to be facing an ice age. So this is what is this is directly comes from their stuff. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, is soliciting innovation research proposals to investigate the physical properties of ice crystals for the development of new solutions to protect warfighters and infrastructure and enhance operational capabilities in extreme cold weather. They love putting initials, so ECW means that. The Ice Control for Cold Environments, ICE, program aims to leverage biological adaptations to cold environments for novel biologically sourced and inspired material to facilitate Department of Defense operations in ECW. I'm only going to go through this very lightly. They want to try to find biological chemicals that'll wind up, they could use on the soldiers and also the equipment that'll inhibit ice crystals from forming on objects. So the men and women don't get frostbite and the skin cells die. But I think when you go through the thing and you read it, and I'm going to show you in a second, they're also looking at modifying plants, or food plants, so it'll be able to survive real cold weather. Anyway, inhibition of crystallization, recrystallization, isonucleation, molecular adhesion to ice. They were looking at organisms that inhibit environments prone to ice formations have evolved unique biological adaptations. Now this is actually very important, this word here, evolved unique biological, like conifers, Douglas firs, cedar, ferns, stuff like that. They can take extreme cold weather. The tropical plants can't. They didn't discover something I'm going to show you. They didn't seem to indicate it. Anyway, that's what the universities and other government agencies, as well as companies, to come up with some unique biological solution. Things they want to get. Again, look at plants, insects, fungi, bacteria, stuff like that. They can prevent. A leaf can go through and have ice around it and not die, like my tropical plants did. Anyway, the ability to modulate specific properties of ice studies to elucidate the biochemical and physiological adaptations that microbes, plants, and animals display to survive extreme cold have identified a number of biological molecules. That's what they're looking for. Phase 2. Performers will be asked to demonstrate greater than 75% improvement in ice modulation based on applications. And this is some of what they are looking for here in general. But later in the table in phase 2, they want about 5% of the candidates to be able to take these temperatures, -4 degrees to 76 degrees Fahrenheit. These are the temperatures in Antarctica. That's telling you they're expecting an ice age. Or let's put it this way, they want to survive an ice age. They want to demonstrate greater than 75% reduction in tissue narcosis, which means the death of shells. I wrote the definition down here for you. And material tissue reactivity. That means when they have to do a suture or operate on somebody that whatever chemical they come up with doesn't inhibit the healing of the patient. Okay, the ICE program did prove that I'm right about where to go during the polar reversal and to survive the ice age. And I don't think it clicked in their head really what they were trying to get at with this ICE program. They should have turned the question around. Anyway, in Jacksonville, on the 24th to 28th, we had really cold weather, from 28 degrees Fahrenheit down to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, mostly at nighttime. January 15th to 16th, 27th to 28th, we had below freezing weather for a total of 4 days. Most of my tropical plants died right down to the ground. They're coming up now. This is an example where they were coming up. Here's one. This whole thing died. Beautiful leaves like this. It all died and withered away, but it came out from the center of the thing. This was a banana tree. The banana tree totally died. And by the way, it's full of water. And it's coming up from the root. It's coming up on this side also, on the root. This is another one. I can't remember the name of the plant. It died also. Everything up on top died. But it's coming up. It's doing quite well now. Here's another example. These are really big leaves, like this, really. And it all died. This is what's left of it. But it started coming up from the center of the thing again. So what it did, it means that the tropical plants did not have to evolve to deal with extreme cold weather for a long period of time. That's the important part. That's what I'm telling people, and I said in the videos, you should go to look for a place that is between 16 degrees north or south of the equator. The ocean water should still be warmer or hot, and it will lessen the impact of the ice age. Because I'll tell you later, one of the last ones, the ice age will kill you. You can prepare for the earthquakes, the massive earthquakes, the flood with a good door system that could take high pressure and temperature. But you're not going to be able to survive if there's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5,000 feet of glacial ice and snow over your head. You're not getting out. Anyway, this is a gift that the FAA and DoD gave me. U.S. domestic flights grounded as key FAA system goes down. The system didn't go down. There was nothing wrong with the database. Something else happened. You're about to find out. January 10th, NOTAM, Notice to Air Emissions, system stopped processing update at 3:28 p.m. Eastern Time. That's actually on the 9th. And FAA issued a first air traffic control system command center advisory about 7:47 p.m. Eastern Time. At 7:30 a.m. ET Eastern Time, on January 11th, the FAA ordered airlines to pause all domestic departures after its pilot alerting system, NOTAM, system went offline overnight. So it wasn't during the morning there, it was the previous nighttime, it was out. Around 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, flights were beginning to resume. Okay. So NOTAM notice had not been issued since September 11th, 2001. So for like 22 years, that system worked just perfect. No problem at all. In the beginning, they had to come up with an excuse. They didn't know why. Then they came up with this lame-brain excuse. Somebody screwed up a database or damaged the database. It wasn't true. You're about to find out. There's your reason. This is the reason why. The solar flare of January 9th at 6:50 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It takes about 18 to 24 hours for the CME to reach the Earth. Guess what? The amount of time it took from when this thing went, it was 1844, this is really Greenwich Mean Time, to 1850, in other words, 6 minutes, it went from this to that. That's more than, close to the X2, that's more than an X2. I think they're lying. This is also another wavelength of this same thing, and it was incredible. This thing was actually pulsing. I'd never seen that before. Over about 3 or 4 seconds, it was pulsing. And you can go on. By the way, this is the side of the Earth. This is the sun. Anybody who has the brains of a sand flea that thinks that the microbes on that little planet can cause global warming and not that, you're too stupid for these videos. Don't watch them. It's going to ruin your whole day. That's why the FAA shut the system down. On another note, I have a fan whose brother works as a mechanic at an Air Force base. And guess what? They were told hours before of what's going to happen, and the Air Force grounded all their flights also for about 2 hours until this CME passed the Earth. So the Defense Department knew really what was going on. The FAA had to figure out what the hell they were going to do as an excuse. Were they going to take the blame for this? Well, I'd like to add this. Yes, they did lie. I don't blame them. I understand why. They were just as scared as now all of you are. They know they have a major problem with our sun, that it's not behaving very nicely. It's not going to be a Monnier minimum, as some idiot, 5 or 6 years ago thought the sunspot cycle was going to be. He should turn in his degree. Try selling shoes instead. This is going to be the opposite. This is not going to be a quiet sun. This is also the same thing, a different wavelength, but photographed from one of our satellites. This is what went out from what you saw there. That's the CME. They came towards the Earth. Now you understand why they were scared and why they did this. First time in 22 years. Other thing that leads me to believe they're lying on the size of these X flares. About a couple of weeks ago, I came across, this is solar cycle 23. And it was a big one. They reported this one here on November 5th, an X28, the biggest one, but that wasn't true. They had one the day before. That was an X45. They didn't report it. That is the size that they thought the Carrington event was in 1859. I think they were very scared. And for some reason, they now got reclassified. What was interesting, they've seen this pattern. I've seen it too. You have on the 28th an X17, the next day an X10. Here, the second an X8, next day X3. This one, X45, X28 the next day. That pattern is very common. Also from that January 10th, I think NASA warned of radio blackouts that hit actually South America, you can see here, and I think Australia also had some radio blackouts from the same flare. It was not an X1. That's fiction. Later, the one I'm looking at was an X2, but it's more than an X2. That flare was so bright, not like an X1 or X2 I've seen. They're not telling us the whole truth. On a sadder note, but I learned something also here. Were there glaciers in Southern California? Now, I used to live in Canoga Park in the San Fernando Valley, and 2 to 3 feet down, I could find, I dig up and get hardpan, which is alluvium soil that's been compressed. You need a lot of weight to do that. In Seattle, in Bellevue, Washington, in my backyard, it took a backhoe to break through the glacial till, which looked just like asphalt. I'm not kidding. With the blue clay and stuff like that, it was just like asphalt. My mother-in-law died on December 23rd. The funeral was the next week in Southern California. And her gravesite is on the side of a hill, you could see. And this is the pile of dirt that they dug up. This is a close-up. And see these rocks here? Here's a close-up of them. You know what this is? Those are granite rocks that have been ground and made somewhat smooth around the edges by a glacier. This is glacial till. This is more like glacial moraine. That hill, this thing that all these graves are on, I think is a glacial moraine. So if anyone thinks you're not going to have a glacier in Southern California, you're sadly mistaken. Because 12,000 years ago, there's your evidence. You had one. This is the last of it. As I said earlier, you can have a cave system with a good door, even if you have 2,000 or 3,000 feet of ocean water rushing over you for 2 or 3 or even as much as 7 days. In the middle of the country, it would only be for the initial flood when the Pacific rushes over the place. And that would be maybe 1 or 2, tops 3 days until it all drains out. If you're near the coastline, You're going to have the slosh back. You may have to wait for at least a week until the oceans settle down. You can build a cave to be able to withstand the tremendous earthquakes. Are going to last for not a few minutes, but hours, many hours. And so the whole thing is, the key part is really how you build it, and also the cave system door. That's why the foundation is interested in. By the way, I want to find the large engineering companies now to give me a quote for designing the door system. Then I'll go to DARPA or DHS to see if I can get a grant from them to have the thing designed, a test model built, and then test it. Anyway, you're not surviving this. This could be Appalachia, except the mountains were not as high as these. The whole thing was just white. Even if you built a cave system up high, you get out, where are you going to find food? You don't even know where to go. There's no way. Same thing, the Rockies. Yeah, Denver could be someplace down there, 3,000 to 4,000 feet. Your chances of surviving, 0. Even if you went through, you survived the flood, the earthquakes, you're not surviving this. You're not getting out of it. And if you somehow crawled out, all you see would be this. Where do you go for food? There isn't going to be any. There's no animals. There's no plants. They're all buried down there. Now you understand the problem. This is a serious problem. It's time to wake up. As I said earlier, this is the last slide. The next video is going to be on the DHS and FEMA, my letter to them, a brief outline of what it is. I'm also going to include a timeline because it makes sense to put this whole thing together to understand what government is doing. It'll be further proof that I'm right, and they're right also, that this event is going to happen. And that's it. This isn't a joke. Anyway, Dye-Hole Foundation is a 501c3. It's a science foundation, tax deductible. Here's the website. You can get the books from Dye-Hole Foundation or from Amazon. Amazon's rate for Europe mailing, or Canada, is a little bit more than what I've been able to get out of the post office. You can make contributions to research at dyeholefoundation.com through PayPal. The money is going to be used for, again, design work and finding the engineering companies, and me having to maybe fly to them to talk to them. And finally, emails at info@dyeholefoundation.com if you want to be put on the mailing list. Thank you very much.